From decrying illegal immigration to espousing an America First trade policy, from denouncing angry mobs to taking jabs at crazy Maxine and Pocahontas, few would disagree that when it comes to triggering lefties, President Trump is the ultimate Zen master. And given the president's almost superhuman ability to drive the left insane with the push of a few buttons to his Twitter account, one might be forgiven for being surprised that one seemingly ubiquitous Saturday tweet topped all or most of the rest, not by calling someone horseface, although yeah, that was hilarious, or taking another well-deserved jab at Robert Mueller's witch hunt, but by bringing a key issue to light that the left desperately wants to hide. Namely, voter fraud. All levels of government and law enforcement are watching carefully for voter fraud, including during early voting. Trump tweeted, "Cheat at your own peril. Violators will be subject to maximum penalties, both civil and criminal." Now if you're a normal person reading this, you might think, what's the big deal? Isn't Trump basically saying law enforcement will be looking out for those who, break law? And you'd be entirely correct, but remember, when it comes to liberals, we aren't talking about normal people, not on any intellectual or moral level. We are talking about people whose entire lives revolve around obtaining power, retaining power, and using that power to pound the rest of us into submission by any means necessary. So when Trump or anyone else to the right of center talks about an issue like voter fraud, liberals don't hear law and order or fair elections, but instead they see it as mean old Trump trying to take away one of their primary tools for stealing elections. And they go absolutely ballistic. The first strategy, of course, is to claim that voter fraud doesn't exist. It's a conspiracy theory, don't you know? Voter fraud is virtually non-existent, tweeted the Ohio State Young Democratic Socialists. Wage theft is ubiquitous. Only one gets talked about because we are governed by elites and fascists. Well, alrighty then. Donald Trump and Republicans know that they have to lie about voter fraud, which is virtually non-existent, to suppress and intimidate voters in order to win, tweeted Bernie Sanders, because nobody would ever try any funny business to keep him from getting elected. Don't be fooled by the continued demonization of immigrants, tweeted CNN's Jim Acosta. Voter fraud in this country is actually very rare. What we should be on the lookout for is Russian meddling. One cannot help but wonder if Acosta is aware that immigrants aren't allowed to vote until they become citizens. Voter fraud is itself a fraud, wrote MSNBC analyst Richard Stengel. The highest measured rate of voter fraud in our elections is 0.0003%. It is virtually non-existent. It's a common theme, one that's been repeated often since Trump first raised the issue after the 2016 election, and it still begs the question, if voter fraud is so non-existent, why are these geniuses so apoplectic that Trump is concerned about it? The other tactic is to accuse Trump and others concerned about voter fraud of voter suppression, or trying to keep minorities from voting. But by some of the below reactions, you'd think Trump was planning to have hooded KKK members at polling places checking party affiliations and allowing only Republicans to enter. Shame on you, Mr. President, for trying to intimidate voters, especially while you yourself were under investigation for the most egregious electoral fraud this nation has ever experienced, wrote former Clinton-era Labor Secretary Robert Reich. Don't let this fear-mongering deter you from voting, wrote Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. It's your civil right. It's how you make your voice heard. And it scares him more than anything. Normally this stuff is printed on anonymous, deniable flyers and thrust under minority voters' doors in the dead of night, wailed David Frum. Seriously? Only Frum and his ilk would think eligible to vote minorities are so stupid that they would stay away from the polls simply because Trump said authorities would be making sure everyone is eligible to vote. Singer Bette Midler tried to tattle to Twitter's Jack Dorsey. Hey, Jack, this habitual bully is at it again, intimidating early voters aka good citizens participating in the democratic process that is part of the foundation of this country. I don't know. Trump say citizens weren't allowed to vote? Maybe I missed that part, Betty. Of course, there's always the possibility that you and I define citizen differently, but seriously, in what universe does insisting that one must be properly and legally registered to vote in order to vote amount to voter suppression? Sure, maybe it suppresses the votes of dead people, illegal immigrants, and people who plan to vote early and often on election day, but other than that, on what level is insisting on law and order some sort of immoral act? In other words, there is one logical reason, and one logical reason alone, why Democrats wail about voter fraud, because they know the practice exists and they expect to benefit from it. Even if the numbers aren't in the millions that Trump alleged after 2016, a few thousand or even a few hundred well-placed votes can turn the tide in key districts, and things grow even more murky when Democrats won't even allow investigations into the issue. Case in point, President Trump being forced to dissolve the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity in January because certain blue states refused to cooperate or give the commission any data. Might they have something to hide?